fight that. Let me down, let me know. Coming right back. I think we should all collectively just start bullying TikTok. Oh, God, it sucks. What was the last thing y'all heard? I don't know how much I read without y'all. And you propose we do that? I don't know. Before we continue, I need to know. What do you need to know? Him seeing Aelin? Where is that bodysuit from? It's not a bodysuit. It's just a crop top. But I think I got it from Forever 21, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure I got it from Forever 21. It's cute, right? Thank you. Now that I like, because my skin used to be relatively the same shade as this. I mean, it still like almost is, but like without my tan, it looked like I was like naked. Like it looked like I wasn't wearing anything. But I have like a farmer's tan too. He said Aelin's name. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. So I didn't even read that much. Okay. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Aelin. He mouthed her name. As if she heard it, she opened her eyes, coming fully alert as she scanned the doorway, the room beyond, then the bedroom itself for any danger. And then finally, she looked at him and went utterly still, even as her hair shifted in the gentle breeze. The pillow beneath his face had become damp. She just stretched out her legs like a cat and said, "I'm ready to accept your thanks for my spectacular rescue at any time, you know." He couldn't stop the tears leaking down his face, even as he rasped, "Remind me never to get on your bad side." A smile tugged at her lips, and her eyes, their eyes, sparkled. "Hello, Adian." Hearing his name on her tongue snapped something loose, and he had to close his eyes, his body barking in pain as it shook with the force of the tears trying to get out of him. When he'd mastered himself, he said hoarsely, "Thank you for your spectacular rescue. Let's never do it again." They're so cute. Stop. She snorted, her eyes lined with silver. "You're exactly the way I dreamed you'd be." Something in her smile told him that she already knew, that Ren or Kale had told her about him, about being Ardalan's whore, about the Bane. So all he could say was, "You're a little taller than I'd imagined, but no one's perfect. It's a miracle the king managed to resist executing you until yesterday." Tell me he's in a rage, the likes of which have never been seen before. If you listen hard enough, you can actually hear him shrieking from the palace. Adian laughed, and it made his wound ache, but the laugh died as he looked her over from head to toe. "I'm going to throttle Ren and the captain for letting you save me alone." And here we go. She looked at the ceiling and sighed loudly. A minute of pleasant conversation, and then the territorial Fae bullshit comes raging out. I waited an extra 30 seconds. Her mouth quirked to the side. "I honestly thought you'd last 10. He laughed again, and realized that though he'd loved her before, he'd merely loved the memory, the princess taken away from him. But the woman, the queen, the last shred of family he had. "It was worth it," he said, his smile fading. "You were worth it. All these years, all the waiting. You're worth it." He'd known the moment she had looked up at him as she stood before his execution block, defiant and wicked and wild. "I think that's the healing tonic talking," she said, but her throat bobbed as she wiped at her eyes. She lowered her feet to the floor. "Kale said you're even meaner than I am most of the time. Kale is already on his way to being throttled, and you're not helping." She gave that half smile again. "Ren's in the north. I didn't get to see him before Kale convinced him to go there for his own safety." "Good," he managed to say, and patted the bed beside him. Someone had stuffed him into a clean shirt, so he was decent enough, but he managed to haul himself halfway into a sitting position. "Come here." She glanced at the bed, at his hand, and he wondered whether he'd crossed some line, assumed some bond between them that no longer existed, until her shoulders slumped and she uncoiled from the chair in a smooth, feline motion before plopping down on the mattress. Her scent hit him, For a second, he could only breathe it deep into his lungs, his fey instincts roaring that this was his family, this was his queen, this was Aelin. He would have known her even if he were blind. I see SJM sneaking that little... Wait, did this book come out before or after Song of Achilles? Anyway, it's basically the same quote. Even if there was another scent entwined with hers, staggeringly powerful and ancient and male. Interesting. She plumped up the pillows, and he wondered if she knew how much it meant to him, as a demi-fae male, to have her lean over to straighten his blankets too, then run a sharp, critical eye down his face, to fuss over him. He stared right back, scanning for any wounds, any signs that the blood on her the other day hadn't belonged to only those men, but save for a few shallow, scabbed cuts on her left forearm, she was unharmed. When she seemed assured that he wasn't about to die, and when he was assured the wounds on her arm weren't infected, she leaned back on the pillows and folded her hands over her abdomen. Do you want to go first, or should I? Outside, gulls were crying to each other, and that soft, briny breeze kissed his face. You, he whispered. Tell me everything. So she did. Hold on. They talked and talked until Adian's voice became hoarse, and then Aelin bullied him into drinking a glass of water. And then she decided that he was looking peaky, so she padded to the kitchen and dug up some beef broth and bread. Lysandra, Kale, and Nesrin were nowhere to be seen, so they had the apartment to themselves. Good. Aelin didn't feel like sharing her cousin right now. As Adian devoured his food, he told her the unabridged truth of what had happened to him these past 10 years, just as she'd done for him. And when they were both finished telling their stories, when their souls were drained and grieving, but gilded with growing joy, she nestled down across from Adian, her cousin, her friend. They'd been forged of the same ore, two sides of the same golden, scarred coin. She'd known it when she spied him atop the execution platform. She couldn't explain it. No one could understand that instant bond, that soul-deep assurance and rightness, unless they, too, had experienced it. But she owed no explanations to anyone. Not about Adian. They were still sprawled on the bed, the sun now settling into late afternoon, and Adian was just staring at her, blinking as if he couldn't quite believe it. Are you ashamed of what I've done? She dared to ask. His brow creased. Why would you ever think that? She couldn't quite look him in the eye as she ran a finger down the blanket. Are you? Adian was silent long enough that she lifted her head, but found him gazing toward the door, as though he could see through it, across the city, to the captain. When he turned to her, his handsome face was open, soft in a way she doubted many ever saw. Never, he said. I could never be ashamed of you. She doubted that, and when she twisted away, he gently grabbed her chin, forcing her eyes to him. You survived. I survived. We're together again. I once begged the gods to let me see you, if only for a moment, to see you and know you'd made it. Just once. That was all I ever hoped for. She couldn't stop the tears that began slipping down her face. Whatever you had to do to survive, whatever you did from spite or rage or selfishness, I don't give a damn. You're here, and you're perfect. You always were, and you always will be. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. She flung her arms around him, careful of his injuries, and squeezed him as tightly as she dared. He wrapped an arm around her, the other bracing them, and buried his face in her neck. I miss you. I missed you, she whispered into him, breathing in his scent. That male warrior's scent she was just learning, remembering. Every day, I missed you. Her skin grew damp beneath his face. Never again, he promised. It was honestly no surprise that after Aelin had trashed the vaults, a new warren of sin and debauchery had immediately sprung up in the slums. The owners weren't even trying to pretend it wasn't a complete imitation of the original, not with a name like the Pits, but while its predecessor had at least provided a tavern-like atmosphere, the Pits didn't bother. In an underground chamber hewn from rough stone, you paid for your alcohol with your cover charge, and if you wanted to drink, you had to brave the casks in the back and serve yourself. Aylin found herself somewhat inclined to like the owners. They operated by a different set of rules. But some things remained the same. The floors were slick and reeking of ale and piss and worse, but Aylin had anticipated that. What she hadn't expected exactly was the deafening noise. The rock walls and close quarters magnified the wild cheers from the fighting pits the place had been named after, where onlookers were betting on the brawls within, brawls like the one she was about to participate in. Beside her, Cale, cloaked and masked, shifted on his feet. "This is a terrible idea," he murmured. "You said you couldn't find the valve nests anyway," she said with equal quiet, tucking a loose strand of her hair, dyed red once more, back under her hood. "Well, here are some lovely commanders and minions just waiting for you to track them home." Consider it Arobyn's form of apology, because he knew that she would bring Cale with her tonight. She guessed as much, debated not bringing the captain, but in the end she needed him here, needed to be here herself more than she needed to upend Arobyn's plans. Cale sliced a glare in her direction, but then shifted his attention to the crowd again, around them, and said again, "This is a terrible idea." She followed his stare toward Arobyn, who stood across the sandy pit in which two men were fighting, now so bloodied up that she couldn't tell who was in worse shape. "He summons, I answer. Just keep your eyes open." It was the most they'd said to each other all night, but she had other things to worry about. It had taken just 1 minute in this place to understand why Arobyn had summoned her. The Val guards flocked to the pits, not to arrest and torture, but to watch. They were interspersed among the crowd, hooded, smiling, cold, as if the blood and rage fueled them. Beneath her black mask, Aylin focused on her breathing. 3 days after his rescue, Adian was still injured badly enough that he remained bedridden, one of Cale's most trusted rebels watching over the apartment, but she needed someone at her back tonight, so she'd asked Cale and Nesrin to come, even if she knew it would play into Arobyn's plans. She'd tracked them down at a covert rebel meeting, to no one's delight, especially when, apparently, the Valg had vanished with their victims and couldn't be found despite days of tracking them. One look at Cale's pursed lips had told her exactly whose antics he thought were to blame for it, so she was glad to talk to Nesrin instead, if only to take her mind off the new task pressing on her, its chiming now a mocking invitation from the glass castle. But destroying the clock tower, freeing magic, had to wait. At least she'd been right about Arobyn wanting Cale here. The Valg clearly an offering meant to entice the captain to continue trusting and confiding in him. Aylin sensed Arobyn's arrival at her side moments before his red hair slid into her peripheral vision. "Any plans to wreck this establishment too?" A dark head appeared at his other side, along with the wide-eyed male stares that followed it everywhere. Aylin was grateful for the mask that hid the tightness in her face as Lysandra inclined her head in greeting. Aylin made a good show of looking Lysandra up and down and then turned to Arobyn, dismissing the courtesan as if she were no more than a bit of ornamentation. "I just cleaned the suit," Aylin drawled to Arobyn. "Wrecking this shithole would only mess it up again." Arobyn chuckled. "In case you were wondering, a certain celebrated dancer was on a ship heading south with all her dancers before word of your escapades even reached the docks." The roar of the crowd nearly drowned out his words. Lysandra frowned at a reveler who nearly spilled his ale on the skirts of her mint and cream gown. "Thank you," Aylin said, and meant it. She didn't bring up Arobyn's little game of playing her and Cale against each other, not when that was precisely what he wanted. Arobyn gave her a smile smug enough to make her ask, "Is there a particular reason that my services are necessary here tonight, or is this another present of yours? After you so gleefully wrecked the vaults, I'm now in the market for a new investment. The owners of the pits, despite being public about wanting an investor, are hesitant to accept my offer. Participating tonight will go a long way toward convincing them of my considerable assets and what I might bring to the table, and make a threat to the owners to show off his deadly arsenal of assassins, and how they might help turn an even higher profit with fixed fights against trained killers." She knew exactly what he would say next. "Alas, my fighter fell through," Arobyn went on. "I needed a replacement. And who am I fighting as, exactly? I told the owners you were trained by the silent assassins of the Red Desert. You remember them, don't you? Give the pit lord whatever name you want." Prick. She'd never forget those months in the Red Desert, or who had sent her there. She jerked her chin at Lysandra. Aren't you a little fussy for this sort of place? And here I was thinking you and Lysandra had become friends after your dramatic rescue. Arabin, let's go watch somewhere else, Lysandra murmured. The fight's ending. She wondered what it was like to have to endure the man who had slaughtered your lover, but Lysandra's face was a mask of worried, wary mildness, another skin she wore as she idly cooled herself with a gorgeous fan of lace and ivory, so out of place in the cesspit. Pretty, isn't it? Arabin gave it to me, Lysandra said, noticing her attention. A small trinket for such a tremendously talented lady. Oh, he makes me sick. He makes me sick, but he's so sexy. God, I'm so conflicted over him. Anyway, Arabin said, leaning down to kiss Lysandra's bare neck. Aelin clamped down on her disgust so hard that she choked on it. Arabin sauntered off into the crowd like a snake through the grass, catching the eye of the willowy pit lord. When he was deep enough into the crowd, Aelin stepped closer to Lysandra. The courtesan glanced away from her, and Aelin knew it wasn't an act. So softly, no one could hear, Aelin said, "Thank you for the other day." Lysandra kept her eyes on the crowd and the bloodied fighters around them. They landed on the Valg, and she quickly looked at Aelin again, shifting so that the crowd formed a wall between her and the demons across the pit. Is he all right? Yes, just resting and eating as much as he can, Aelin said. And now that Adian was safe, she would soon have to begin fulfilling her little favor to Arabin, though she doubted her former master had long to live once Adian recovered and found out what sort of danger Arabin was putting her in, let alone what he'd done to her throughout the years. Good, Lysandra said, the crowd keeping them cocooned. Arabin clapped the pit lord on the shoulder and stalked back toward them. Aelin tapped her foot until the king of the assassins was between them again. Cale subtly moved within earshot, a hand on his sword. Aelin just braced her hands on her hips. Who shall my opponent be? Arabin inclined his head toward a pack of the Val guards. Whichever one of them you desire. I just hope you choose one in less time than it's taken you to decide which one to hand over to me. So that was what this was about. Who had the upper hand? And if she refused, with the debt unpaid, he could do worse. So much worse. You're insane, Cale said to Arabin, following his line of sight. So he speaks, Arabin purred. You're welcome, by the way, for the little tip. He flicked his gaze toward the gathered Valg, so they were a gift for the captain then. Cale glared. I don't need you to do my work. Stay out of it, Aelin snapped, hoping Cale would understand that ire wasn't for him. He turned back toward the blood-splattered sand, shaking his head. Let him be mad. She had plenty to rage at him for anyway. The crowd died down, and the pit lord called for the next fighter. You're up, Arabin said, smiling. Let's see what those things are capable of. Lysandra squeezed his arm, as if pleading for him to let it go. I would keep back, Aelin said to her, cracking her neck. You wouldn't want to get blood on that pretty dress. Arabin chuckled. Put on a good show, would you? I want the owners impressed and pissing themselves. Oh, she would put on a show. After days cooped up in the apartment at Adian's side, she had energy to spare. And she didn't mind spilling some Valg blood. She shoved through the crowd, not daring to draw more attention to Cale by saying goodbye. People took one look at her and backed away. With the suit, the boots, and the mask. She knew she was death incarnate. Aelin dropped into a swagger, her hips shifting with each step, rolling her shoulders as if loosening them. The crowd grew louder, restless. She sidled up to the willowy pit lord, who'd looked her over and said, "No weapons." She merely cocked her head and lifted her arms, turning in a circle, and even allowed the pit lord's little minion to pat her down with his sweaty hands to prove that she was unarmed, as far as they could tell. Name, the pit lord demanded. Around her, gold was already flashing. Ansel of Briarcliff, she said, the mask distorting her voice to a gravelly rasp. Opponent. Aelin looked across the pit to the crowd gathered and pointed. Him. The Val commander was already grinning at her. It's not boring, it's just a lot of talking. It's just a lot of, like, dialogue. Chapter 24. Cale didn't know what the hell to think as Aelin leapt into the pit, landing on her haunches, but the crowd had seen whom she'd pointed to and was already in a frenzy, shoving to the front, passing gold at last-minute bets were made. He had to plant his heels to keep from being knocked over the open lip of the pit. No ropes or railings here. If you fell in, you were fair game. Oh, I thought my phone was dying. Sorry. A small part of him was glad Nesrin was on watch in the back, and a smaller part of him was glad for a night without more fruitless hunting for the new Valg nests, even if it meant dealing with Aelin for a few hours, even if Erebin Hamel had given him this little gift, a gift that he hated to admit he sorely needed and did appreciate. But that was no doubt how Erebin operated. Kel wondered what the price would be, or whether his fear of a potential price was payment enough for the king of the assassins. Dressed head to toe in black, Aelin was a living shadow, pacing like a jungle cat on her side of the pit as the Valg commander jumped in. He could have sworn the ground shuddered. They were both insane, Aelin and her master. Erebin had said to choose any one of the Valg. She'd pick the leader. They'd barely spoken since their fight after Adian's rescue. Frankly, she didn't deserve a word out of him, but when she'd hunted him down an hour ago, interrupting a meeting that was so secret they'd disclosed the location to the rebel leaders only an hour before, maybe he was a fool, but he couldn't in good conscience say no, if only because Adian would have slaughtered him for it. But since the Valg were here, yes, this night had been useful after all. The pit lord began shouting the rules. Simply, there were none, save for no blades, just hands and feet and wits. Gods above. Aelin stilled her pacing, and Kale had to elbow an over-eager man in the stomach to keep from being shoved into the pit. The Queen of Terrasin was in a fighting pit in the slums of Rifthold. No one here, he'd wager, would believe it. He was hardly able to believe it himself. The pit lord roared for the match to begin, and then they moved. The commander lunged with a punch so swift most men would have had their heads spun around, but Aelin dodged and caught his arm in one hand, locking it into a hold he knew was bone-snapping. As the commander's face twisted with pain, she drove her knee up into the side of his head. It was so fast, so brutal, that even the crowd didn't know what the hell had happened until the commander was staggering back, and Aelin was dancing on her toes. The commander laughed, straightening. It was the only break Aelin gave him before she went on the offensive. She moved like a midnight storm, whatever training she'd had in Wendelin, whatever that prince had taught her. Gods help them all. Punch after punch, block, lunge, duck, spin. The crowd was a writhing thing, foaming at the mouth at the swiftness, the skill. Kale had seen her kill. It had been a while since he'd seen her fight for the enjoyment of it. And she was enjoying the hell out of this. An opponent worthy of her, he supposed, as she locked her legs around the commander's head and rolled, flipping him. Sand sprayed around them. She wound up on top, driving her fist down into the man's cold, handsome face, only to be hurled off with a twist so swift that Kale could hardly follow the movement. Aelin hit the bloodied sand and uncoiled to her feet just as the commander attacked once more. Then they were again a blur of limbs and blows and darkness. Across the pit, Erebin was wide-eyed, grinning, a starving man before a feast. Lysandra clung to his side, her knuckles white as she gripped his arm. Men were whispering in Erebin's ear, their eyes locked on the pit, as hungry as Erebin, either the owners of the pits or prospective clients bargaining for the use of the woman fighting with such wild wrath and wicked delight. Aelin landed a kick to the commander's stomach that sent him slamming into the rock wall. He slumped, gasping for air. The crowd cheered, and Aelin flung out her arms, turning in a slow circle, death triumphant. The crowd's answering roar made Kale wonder if the ceiling would come crashing down. The commander hurtled for her, and Aelin whirled, catching him and locking his arms and neck into a hold not so easily broken. She looked at Erebin, as if in question. Her master glanced at the wide-eyed, ravenous men beside him, then nodded to her. Kale's stomach turned over. Erebin had seen enough, proved enough. It hadn't even been a fair fight. Aelin had let it go on because Erebin had wanted it to go on, and when she took out that clock tower and her magic was back, what checks would there be against her? Against Adian and that Fey prince of hers, and all the warriors like them. A new world, yes, but a world in which the ordinary human voice would be nothing more than a whisper. Aelin twisted the commander's arms, and the demon shrieked in pain, and then Aelin was staggering back, clutching her forearm, at the blood shining bright through the shred in her suit. It was only when the commander whirled, blood slipping down his chin, his eyes pitch black, that Cale understood. He'd bitten her. Cale hissed through his teeth. The commander licked his lips, his bloody grin growing. Even with the crowd, Cale could hear the Valk demon say, "I know what you are now, you half-breed bitch." Aelin lowered the hand she'd clapped on her arm, blood shining on her dark glove. "Good thing I know what you are too, prick." End it. She had to end it now. "What's your name?" she said, circling the demon commander. The demon inside the man's body chuckled. "You cannot pronounce it in your human tongue." The voice skittered down Cale's veins, icing them. "So condescending for a mere grunt," she crooned. "I should bring you down to Morath myself, half-breed, and see how much you talk then. See what you make of all the delicious things we do to your kind." Morath, Duke Parrington's keep. Cale's stomach turned leaden. That was where they brought the prisoners who weren't executed, the ones who vanished in the night, to do the gods knew what with them. Aelin didn't give him time to say anything more, and Cale again wished he could see her face, if only to know what the hell was going on in her head as she tackled the commander. She slammed his considerable weight into the sand and grabbed his head. Crack went the commander's neck. Her hands lingering on either side of the demon's face, Aelin stared at the empty eyes, at the open mouth. The crowd screamed in triumph. Aelin panted, her shoulders hunched, and then she straightened, brushing the sand off the knees of her suit. She gazed up at the pit lord. "Call it." The man blanched. "Victory is yours." She didn't bother looking up again as she knocked her boot against the stone wall, freeing a thin, horrible blade. Cale was grateful for the screams of the crowd as she stomped it down through the neck of the commander, again and again. In the dim lighting, no one else could tell the stain in the sand wasn't the right color. No one but the stone-faced demons gathering around them, marking Aelin, watching each movement of her leg as she severed the commander's head from his body and then left it in the sand. Damn! Jesus. Aelin's arms were trembling as she took Arobyn's hand and was hauled out of the pit. Her master crushed her fingers in a lethal grip, pulling her close in what anyone else would have thought was an embrace. "That's twice now, darling. You haven't delivered." I said, "unconscious." Bloodlust got the better of me, it seems. She eased back, her left arm aching from the vicious bite the thing had given her. Bastard. She could almost feel its blood seeping through the thick leather of her boot, feel the weight of the gore clinging onto the toe. "I expect results, Ansel, and soon." "Don't worry, Master." Cale was making his way toward a darkened corner, Nessra in a shadow behind him, no doubt readying to track the Valg once they left. "You'll get what's owed to you." Aelin looked toward Lysandra, whose attention wasn't on the corpse being hauled out of the pit by the grunts, but fixed, with predatory focus, on the other Valg guards sneaking out. Aelin cleared her throat, and Lysandra blinked, her expression smoothing into unease and repulsion. Aelin made to slip out, but Arobyn said, "Aren't you the least bit curious where we—" I don't know if I want to read this. I don't know if I want to read that. Because if I find out that they buried him in some unmarked grave, I might just lose it. I might just lose it a little bit. Why the fuck would he bring this shit up right now? I was vibing. I was fine. I wasn't thinking about him. I wasn't thinking about anything. This head was empty of thoughts. I was over here thinking about how Arobyn was gonna die because Aelin told him he was gonna get what he deserved. Alright, well, the only way to do it is to just do it. Aelin made to slip out, but Arobyn said, "Aren't you the least bit curious where we buried Sam?" He'd known his words would register like a blow. He'd had the upper hand, the sure kill shot the entire time. Even Lysandra recoiled a bit. Aelin slowly turned. Is there a price for learning that information? A flick of his attention to the pit. You just paid it. I wouldn't put it past you to give a f. She bared her teeth. Is that a threat? It is a suggestion, he said smoothly, that you remember what my considerable influences are. It is a suggestion, he said smoothly, that you remember what my considerable influences are. Like, not even a little bit. Oh, there we go. You can hear me? Can you see me? Can y'all see me? Okay, you see me? Okay. 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 Can't see. Can't see me? Can see but can hear. It says paused. I can see and hear, but I left and rejoined. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Just leave and come back. Try leaving and coming back, and then hopefully that works. Alright, we're gonna keep going. I'm just gonna move up a little bit. She bared her teeth. Is that a threat? It's a suggestion, he said smoothly, that you remember what my considerable influences are, and what I might have to offer you and yours during a time when you were desperate for so many things. Money, fighters, a glance at the vanishing captain and Nesserin. Things your friends need, too. For a price. Always for a price. Just tell me where you buried Sam and let me leave. I need to clean my shoes. He smiled, satisfied that he'd won and she'd accepted his little offering, no doubt soon to make another bargain. And then another, for whatever she needed from him. He named the location, a small graveyard by the river's edge, not in the crypts of the Assassin's Keep, where most of them were entombed, likely meant as an insult to Sam, not realizing Sam wouldn't have wanted to be buried in the keep anyway. Still, she choked out, "Thank you." And then she made herself look at Lysandra and drawl. I hope he's paying you enough. Lysandra's attention, however, was on the long scar marring Arobyn's neck, the scar Wesley had left. But Arobyn was too busy smiling at Aelin to notice. We'll be seeing each other again soon, he said. Another threat. Hopefully when you've upheld your end of the bargain. The hard-faced men who had been at Arobyn's side during the fight still lingered several feet away. The owner of the pits, they gave her a slight nod that she didn't return. Tell your new partners I'm officially retired, she said by way of farewell. It was an effort of will to leave Lysandra with him in that hellhole. She could feel the Valg sentries monitoring her, feel their indecision and malice, and hoped that Kael and Nesserin didn't run into trouble as she vanished into the open, cool night air. She hadn't asked them to come just to watch her back, but to make them realize precisely how stupid they'd been in trusting a man like Arobyn Hamel, even if Arobyn's gift was the reason they were now able to track the Valg back to wherever they were squatting. She just hoped that despite her former master's gift, they at last understood that she should have killed Dorian that day. What? I thought chapter 25 was going to be her visiting the grave. Are you kidding me? I mean, I'm relieved, but at the same time, like, I thought she was gonna visit his grave. That's Saturday. Oh, so that's chapter 30. So that's chapter 30, huh? Oh my god. No, I can't. Oh my god. Oh, I can't. It's 39. Oh, okay. Aww. Wait, so are we reading 25? Since it's Manon? I've been reading all of Manon's by myself lately. Which, I mean, I'm not really complaining about. Yes, I'm reading it. Or I'm reading it by myself. Oh, yes, I'm reading it. Okay. No, we can read it. All right. Chapter 25. Alid was washing dishes, carefully listening to the cook complain about the next scheduled shipment of supplies. A few wagons would arrive in 2 weeks, it seemed, carrying wine and vegetables and perhaps, if they were lucky, salted meat. Yet it wasn't what was coming that interested her, but how it was carried, what sort of wagons might bear it, and where Alid might best hide in one. That was when one of the witches walked in. Not Manon, but the one named Astrin, golden-haired, with eyes like a star-flecked night and a wildness in her very breath. Alid had not long ago noted how quick she was to grin, had marked the moments when Astrin thought no one was looking and gazed across the horizon, her face tight. Secrets. Astrin was a witch with secrets, and secrets made people deadly. Alid kept her head down, shoulders tucked in, as the kitchen quieted in the third's presence. Astrin just swaggered right up to the cook, who had gone pale as death. He was a loud, kind man most days, but a coward at heart. "Lady Astrin," he said, and everyone, Alid included, bowed. The witch smiled, with white, normal teeth, thank the gods. "I was thinking I might help with the dishes." Alid's blood chilled. She felt the eyes of everyone in the kitchen fix on her. "As much as we appreciate it, lady, are you rejecting my offer, mortal?" Alid didn't dare to turn around. Beneath the soapy water, her pruny hands shook. She fisted them. Fear was useless. Fear got you killed. "No. Of course, lady. We and Alid will be glad for the help." And that was that. The clatter and chaos of the kitchen slowly resumed, but conversation remained hushed. They were all watching, waiting, either for Alid's blood to spill on the gray stones or to overhear anything juicy from the ever-smiling lips of Astrin Blackbeak. She felt each step the witch took toward her, unhurried but powerful. "You wash, I'll dry," the sentinel said at her side. Alid peeked out from behind the curtain of her hair. Astrin's black and gold eyes glittered. "Thank you," she made herself stammer. The amusement in those immortal eyes grew. Not a good sign. But Alid continued her work, passing the witch the pots and plates. "An interesting task for a lord's daughter," Astrin observed, quietly enough that no one else in the bustling kitchen could hear. "I'm happy to help. That chain says otherwise." Alid didn't falter with the washing, didn't let the pot in her hand slip an inch. 5 minutes, and then she could murmur some explanation and run. "No one else in this place is chained up like a slave. What makes you so dangerous, Alid? Lock in." Alid gave a little shrug. An interrogation. That's what this was. Manon had called her a spy. It seemed her sentinel had decided to assess what level of threat she posed. "You know, men have always hated and feared our kind," Astrin went on. "It's rare for them to catch us, to kill us. But when they do, they delight in such horrible things. In the wastes, they've made machines to break us apart. The fools never realized that all they needed to do to torture our kind, to make us beg," she glanced down at Alid's leg, "was to chain us, keep us tied to this earth." "I'm sorry to hear that." 2 of the foul pluckers had hooked their hair behind their ears in a futile attempt to overhear them. But Astra knew how to keep her voice low. "You're what, 15, 16, 18? Small for your age." Astrin gave her a look that made Alid wonder if she could see through the homespun dress to the bandage she used to flatten her full breasts into an unnoticeable chest. "You must have been 8 or 9 when the magic fell." Alid scrubbed at the pot. She'd finish it and go, talking about magic around these people, so many of them eager to sell any bit of information to the dreadlords who ruled this place. They would earn her a trip to the gallows. "The witchlings who were at your age at the time," the sentinel went on, "never even had a chance to fly. The power doesn't set in until they're first bleeding, at least now that they have the wyverns. But it's not the same, is it?" "I wouldn't know." Astrid leaned in close, an iron skillet in her long, deadly hands. "But your uncle does, doesn't he?" Alid made herself smaller and brought herself a few more seconds of time as she pretended to consider. "I don't understand." "You've never heard the wind calling your name, Alid Lockin? Never felt it tug at you? You've never listened to it and yearned to fly toward the horizon to foreign lands?" She'd spent most of her life locked in a tower, but there had been nights, wild storms, Elide managed to get the last bit of burnt food off the pot and rinsed it, handing it to the witch before wiping her hands on her apron. No, lady, I don't see why I would. Even if she did want to flee, wanted to run to the other end of the world and wash her hands of these people forever. But it had nothing to do with the whispering wind. Asterin's black eyes seemed to devour her whole. You would hear that wind, girl, she said with expert quiet, because anyone with Iron Teeth blood does. I'm surprised your mother never told you. It's passed on through the maternal line. Witch blood, Iron Teeth blood, in her veins, in her mother's lineage. It wasn't possible. Her blood flowed red. She had no iron teeth or nails. Her mother had been the same. If there was ancestry, it was so old that it had been forgotten, but my mother died when I was a child, she said, turning away and nodding her farewell to the head cook. She never told me anything. Pity, Asterin said. The servants all gawked at Elide as she limped out, their questioning eyes telling her enough. They hadn't heard. A small relief then. Gods. Oh, gods. Witch blood. Elide took the stairs up, each movement sending shooting pains through her leg. Was that why Vernon had kept her chained? To keep her from flying off if she ever showed a lick of power? Was that why the windows in the tower in Paris had been barred? No. No, she was human. Fully human. But at the very moment these witches had gathered, when she'd heard those rumors about the demons who wanted to breed, Vernon had brought her here, and had become very, very close with Duke Barrington. She prayed to Aneth with every step upward, prayed to the Lady of Wise Things that she was wrong, that the third was wrong. It wasn't until she reached the foot of the Wing Leader's tower that Elide realized she had no idea where she was going. She had nowhere to go at all, no one to run to. The delivery wagons wouldn't arrive for another few weeks. Vernon could hand her over wherever he wished. Why hadn't he done so immediately? What was he waiting for? To see if the first of the experiments worked before offering her as a bargaining chip for more power? If she was such a valuable commodity, she'd have to go farther than she'd suspect to escape Vernon. Not just the southern continent, but beyond, to land she'd never heard of. But with no money, how would she? No money, except for the bags of coins the Wing Leader left scattered around her room. She peered up the stairs, stretching into the gloom. Maybe she could use the money to bribe someone, a guard, a lower coven witch, to get her out, immediately. Her ankle barked in pain as she hurried up the staircase. She wouldn't take an entire bag, but rather a few coins from each, so the Wing Leader wouldn't notice. Mercifully, the witch's room was empty, and the various bags of coins had been left out with a carelessness only an immortal witch more interested in bloodshed could achieve. Elide carefully set about stuffing coins into her pocket, the binding around her breasts and her shoes so that they wouldn't be discovered all at once, so that they wouldn't jingle. Are you out of your mind? Elide froze. Asterin was leaning against the wall, her arms crossed. Well, the third was smiling, each of those razor-sharp iron teeth glinting in the afternoon light. Bold, mad little thing, the witch said, encircling Elide. Not as docile as you pretend, eh? Oh, gods. To steal from our Wing Leader. Please, Elide whispered, begging. Maybe that would work. Please, I need to leave this place. Why? A glance at the pouch of money clenched in Elide's hands. I heard what they're doing to the Yellow Legs. My uncle, if I have your blood, I can't let him use me like that. Running away because of Vernon? At least now we know you're not his spy, witchling. The witch grinned, and it was almost as terrifying as one of Manon's smiles. That was why she'd ambushed her with the knowledge, to see where Elide would run after. Don't call me that, Elide breathed. Is it so bad to be a witch? Asterin spread her fingers, appreciating her iron nails in the dim light. I'm not a witch. What are you, then? Nothing. I'm nobody. I'm nothing. The witch clicked her tongue. Everybody is something. Even the most common witch has her coven. But who has your back, Elide Lockin? No one. Only Aneth. And Elide sometimes thought even that could be her imagination. There's no such thing as a witch being alone. I'm not a witch, she said again. And once she got away, once she left this festering empire, she could be no one at all. No, she's certainly not a witch, Manon snapped from the doorway, gold eyes cold. Start talking. Now. Well... yeah, that bitch got demoted. Manon had endured a fairly shitty day, which was saying something given her century of existence. The Yellowlegs coven had been implanted in a subterranean chamber of the keep, the room carved into the mountain rock itself. Manon had taken one sniff of that bed linen room and walked right back out again. The Yellowlegs didn't want her there. Anyway, while they were cut open by men, while the bit of stone was sewn inside them. No, a Blackbeak had no place in a room where Yellowlegs were vulnerable, and she'd likely make them vicious and lethal as a result. So she'd gone to training, where Sorrel had kicked her ass in hand-to-hand combat. Then there had been not one, not two, but 3 different fights to break apart between the various covens, including the Blue Bloods, who were somehow excited about the Valg. They had gotten their noses broken by suggesting to a Blackbeak coven that it was their divine duty, not just to go through with the implantation, but also to go so far as to physically mate with the Valg. Manon didn't blame her Blackbeaks for shutting down the talk, but she'd had to dole out equal punishments between the 2 groups. And then this. Astrid and Alid in her rooms, the girl wide-eyed and reeking of terror, her third seeming to try to convince the girl to join their ranks. Start talking. Now. Temper. She knew she should rein it in, but the room smelled like human fear, and this was her space. Astrid stepped in front of the girl. She's not a spy for Vernon, Manon. Manon did them the honor of listening as Astrid told her what had happened. When she finished, Manon crossed her arms. Alid was cowering by the bathing chamber door, the bag of coins still gripped in her hands. Where does the line get drawn? Astrid said quietly. Manon flashed her teeth. Humans are for eating and rutting and bleeding, not helping. If she's got witch blood in her, it's a drop, not enough to make her our own. Manon stalked toward her third. You are one of the 13. You have duties and obligations, and yet this is how you spend your time? Astrid held her ground. You said to keep an eye on her, and I did. I got to the bottom of things. She's barely past being a witchling. You want Vernon Locken bringing her down to the chamber? Or over to one of the other mountains. I don't give a shit what Vernon does with his human pets. But once the words were out, they tasted foul. I brought her here so you brought her here as a prize to win back your position. Alid was still trying her best to vanish through the wall. Manon snapped her fingers in the girl's direction. I'm escorting you back to your room. Keep the money if you want. My third has an airy full of wyvern shit to clean out. Manon, Astrid began. Wing leader, Manon growled. When you've stopped acting like a simpering mortal, you may again address me as Manon. And yet you tolerate a wyvern who sniffs flowers and makes puppy eyes at this girl. Why the fuck did she have to bring Abraxas into this? She didn't have to talk shit about Abraxas. Manon almost struck her. Almost went for her throat. But the girl was watching, listening. So Manon grabbed Alid by the arm and yanked her toward the door. She did not have to talk about Abraxas like that. Alid kept her mouth shut as Manon led her down the stairs. She didn't know how the wing leader knew where her room was. She wondered if Manon would kill her once they reached it. Wondered if she'd beg and grovel for mercy when the time came. But after a while, the witch said, if you try to bribe anyone here, they'll just turn you in. Save the money for when you run. Alid hid the shaking in her hands and nodded. The witch gave her a sidelong glance, her golden eyes shimmering in the torchlight. Where the hell would you have run to anyway? There's nothing within 100 miles. The only way you would stand a chance is if you got the... Manon snorted. The supply wagons. Alid's heart sank. Please don't tell Vernon. Don't you think if Vernon wanted to use you like that, he'd have done it already? And why make you play servant? I don't know. He likes games. He might be waiting for one of you to confirm what I am. Manon fell silent again, until they rounded a corner. Alid's stomach dropped down to her feet when she beheld who stood in front of her door, as if she'd summoned him by mere thought. Vernon was wearing his usual vibrant tunic, today a terracin green, and his brows rose at the sight of Manon and Alid. What are you doing here? Manon snapped, coming to a stop in front of Alid's little door. Vernon smiled. Visiting my beloved niece, of course. Though Vernon was taller, Manon seemed to look down her nose at him, seemed bigger than him, as she kept her grip on Elid's arm and said, "For what purpose?" "I was hoping to see how you two were getting along," her uncle purred. But he looked at the hand Manon had around Elid's wrist and the door beyond them. "It seems I needn't have worried." It took Elid longer to catch it than Manon, who bared her teeth and said, "I'm not in the habit of forcing my servants, only slaughtering men like pigs, correct? Their deaths equate to their behavior in life." Manon replied with a kind of calm that made Elid wonder whether she should start running. Vernon let out a low laugh. He was so unlike her father, who had been warm and handsome and broad-shouldered, a year past 30 when he was executed by the king. Her uncle had watched that execution and smiled, and then come to tell her all about it. "Allying yourself with witches?" Vernon asked Elid. "How ruthless of you." Elid lowered her eyes to the ground. "There's nothing to ally against, Uncle. Perhaps I kept you too sheltered for all those years, if you believe that's so." Manon cocked her head. "Say your piece and be gone." "Careful, wing leader," Vernon said. "You know precisely where your power ends." Manon shrugged. "I also know precisely where to bite." Vernon grinned and bit the air in front of him. His amusement honed itself into something ugly as he turned to Elid. "I wanted to check on you. I know how hard today was." Her heart stopped. Had someone told him about the conversation in the kitchens? Had there been a spy in the tower just now? Why would it be hard for her, human? Manon's stare was as cold as iron. "This date is always difficult for the Locke family," Vernon said. "Cal Locke, my brother, was a traitor, you know. A rebel leader for the few months after Terrason was inherited by the king. But he was caught like the rest of them and put down. Difficult for us to curse his name and still miss him, isn't it, Elid?" It hit her like a blow. How had she forgotten? She hadn't said the prayers, hadn't beseeched the gods to look after him. Her father's death day, and she had forgotten him, as surely as the world had forgotten her. Keeping her head down was in an act now, even with the wing leader's eyes on her. "You're a useless worm, Vernon," Manon said. "Go spew your nonsense elsewhere." "Whatever would your grandmother say?" Vernon mused, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "About such behavior." Manon's growl chased after him as he sauntered down the hall. Manon flung open Elid's door, revealing a room barely big enough for a cot and a pile of clothes. She hadn't been permitted to bring any belongings, none of the keepsakes that Fionnuala had hidden all these years. The small doll her mother had brought back from a trip to the southern continent, her father's seal ring, her mother's ivory comb, the first gift Cal Locke had given Marian, the laundress, while courting her. Apparently Marian the Iron Teeth Witch would have been a better name. Manon shut the door with a backward kick. Too small. The room was too small for two people, especially when one of them was ancient and dominated the space just by breathing. Elid slumped onto the cot, if only to put more air between her and Manon. The wing leader stared at her for a long moment and then said, "You can choose, witchling. Blue or red." "What?" "Does your blood run blue or red? You decide. If it runs blue, it turns out I have jurisdiction over you. Little shits like Vernon can't do as they will to my kind, not without my permission. If your blood runs red, well, I don't particularly care about humans, and seeing what Vernon does with you might be entertaining." "Why would you offer this?" Manon gave her a half-smile, all iron teeth and no remorse. "Because I can. If my blood runs blue, won't it confirm what Vernon suspects? Won't he act? A risk you'll have to take. He can try to act on it and learn where it gets him. A trap. And Elid was the bait. Claim her heritage as a witch, and if Vernon took her to be implanted, Manon would have the grounds to kill him. She had a feeling Manon might hope for that. It was not just a risk. It was a suicidal, stupid risk, but better than nothing. The witches, who lowered their eyes for no man, until she could get away. Perhaps she might learn a thing or two about what it was like to have fangs and claws, and how to use them. "Blue," she whispered. "My blood runs blue." "Good choice, witchling," Manon said, and the word was a challenge and an order. She turned away, but glanced over her shoulder. Welcome to the Blackbeaks, witchling. Elide stared after her. She had likely just made the biggest mistake of her life, but it was strange. Strange, that feeling of belonging. Damn! Elida's a whole witch now! Damn! I can't wait for her to get revenge for her family. For her mom and her dad. Good for her. I hope she's the one to kill her uncle too, with his bitch ass. Oh god. Yeah, I love Manon. I just wish that her chapters were a bit more, I don't know, just a bit more, because I feel like I'm reading them and I'm just like, oh god, I want them, but I get it because it's like building up to like the big thing for her, so I can take it. But I love Manon. I love her. It's just a lot of like information being built and stuff, but I get it. It'll get good when it gets good. Yeah. Oh, this is closed. Okay. Thoughts for today? I have no thoughts other than just the feeling of disappointment, because I really thought I was gonna read about Aelin going to Sam's grave, and she didn't. But I will get there. And now that I was ready to rip the Band-Aid today. Who knows if I'll be ready to rip the Band-Aid when the day comes on Saturday. We'll see. All I know is pain from these books anyway, so it's fine. But yeah, it'll be fun to say, fun for y'all, not fun for me. It'll be fun for y'all to watch what I've been dreading since I finished The Assassin's Blade. The moment where she finally sits down and talks to Sam. Oh, I don't even want to think about it. I'm gonna cry. Yeah, get ready to see me crying on Saturday. But other than that, I hope my man's Dorian is gonna be okay. Obviously, okay, how I see Dorian's little like recovery process going is like a lot like Peeta's from the Hunger Games. It's just a lot of like reminding him who he is, reminding him who he trusts and who he loves, and this and that. So I feel like it's gonna be hard, but it's gonna be worth it, hopefully. And then I hope Dorian gets to kill his father. I hope Dorian and Aelin tag team the king. I feel like no one deserves to kill the king more than Aelin and Dorian. And if they go at it together with fire and ice, baby, with fire and ice, I feel like that'll just be the icing on the cake. It really will. And I can't wait to read that. Woo! It's gonna be so good. So good. That is if that even happens. That's what I want to happen though. So we'll see. What else? Kale can suck a dick. I'm mad at him right now because of just how horrible he is acting, which I get it. Man's got trust issues and he's like thinking that Aelin is this horrible person, but like he knew her. He always knew her. Why is he acting like Aelin and Selena were like two different people? Like, yes, they were, but like she was always herself with him. You know? So I'm mad at him right now. Who else? Lysandra, I love her. I can't wait to see her and Adian together. I'm telling you, it has to happen. Lysandra and Adian would be so good together. So good together. I hope it happens. And especially with that little joke that she said about how it would be like dating the male version of Aelin. I feel like they could make a lot of jokes about that right now. I know, I'm sorry, Sarah. I know you love Kale, but like I'm mad at him right now. I'll get over it though. What else? What else did we get today? I already talked about Dorian. I already talked about Sam. Although I could talk about Sam for forever. Aelin is the love of my life. I love her so much. That hasn't changed. Lysandra, talked about her. Arabin. fucking Arabin. Fucking Arabin. God damn it. Fucking Arabin. That's all I have to say about him. It's just, god damn it. Fucking Arabin. Yep. Do you miss Rowan? No. I don't. Not that I don't want him back in the series, but like, if you're asking me if I'm dying to have him back, no, I'm not. I'm chilling with him overseas. He could come back and I'll be happy. He could stay over there. I'd be happy. It's whatever. I haven't thought about him at all during this entire book. Can't wait till he gets his. Who? Kale? Or the king? Aelin misses Rowan though. Yeah, she does. Yeah, she does. Oh, Arabin. I was just talking about Arabin. Yeah. Aelin misses him, so yeah. I guess. I know he's coming back, so but I'm still just like, meh about his character. Not crazy about him, but I don't hate him like I did at first. So he's just kind of there. Yeah. Oh yeah, I figured you were talking about Arabin. I honestly don't know how he's going to die. Like, I feel like I know he's going to die because he's just it's like Ramsay Bolton. Like, he's just one of those characters that he does all these horrible things to Aelin, but eventually you know he's going to get what he has coming. And Aelin literally told him, you'll get what you deserve. And I know she's going to give him exactly what he deserves. I just don't know how. I don't see Aelin. So what I thought originally what was going to happen to him was that Aelin was going to do to him everything that he had ordered Farron to do to Sam. But then I was thinking, I was like, I don't know. Because, like, Aelin is capable of torturing. She's shown it and she's done it before. But I don't know if she would torture Arabin. Because I feel like Arabin is so dangerous that I feel like Aelin won't risk not killing him when she has the chance. You know? So, I don't know. I honestly, I don't know how he's gonna die. It would be nice if he was tortured at least a little bit before he died. Or like if Aelin was like setting this big trap to frame Arabin and like to basically do what Arabin did to her. To set this trap for him and then end up getting him caught by the king and like executed or something, you know? Wednesday, yes, we're doing a live on Wednesday. Wednesday is our next live. So I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I honestly don't know. But yeah, I will see you guys on Wednesday when we will read 26 through 28. Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, thanks for joining today, guys, and sticking through with the technical difficulties that we've been having. Yeah, love y'all. See y'all Wednesday. Bye.